If exercise were a pill, it would be the most powerful drug we have for longevity. G'day team, and welcome back to Overheard in the Emergency Room. Today, I'm doing my intro a little differently. I'm coming to you from the emergency physician's second favourite place, nature. Of course, our most favourite place is in the resuscitation room. A recent study of nature-based prescriptions analysed 28 papers where patients were advised by health professionals to get out into nature. They asked them to exercise in parks, in green spaces, or just outdoors as part of their recommendations for managing chronic disease. The analysis showed improvements in systolic blood pressure by around 5 points, improved depression and anxiety scores, and led to around 900 more steps per day. So I thought, what better way to start this episode? Now, if you've listened to the first two episodes of this show, you might be asking yourself, why on earth is he starting out with a study? That's a little bit heavy. Will you just build into it a little bit? Today, we continue our discussion of the two-tiered blueprint for longevity and health, focusing on something that is very near and dear to my heart, exercise. Prior to medicine, I worked as a strength and conditioning coach for 11 years. I had the pleasure of training athletes for a Soccer World Cup, for the Olympics, and for national championships in Aussie rules football. This is the work that sparked my passion for preventive measures to manage and ideally prevent the development of chronic disease. Like diet, exercise is a hot topic online. The reality is that for everyday people, it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need to buy a weighted vest or go rucking around your neighborhood. You need a plan and to find something you enjoy. Today, we'll discuss the evidence that supports that plan and gives you practical advice to get started on the road to less bad days and more good decades. But before we get into it, if you're liking the show and the content that I'm putting out, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And for more free health and longevity resources, check out my website, drcois.com. Let's get into the Overheard in the Emergency Room podcast. Let's talk about the framework that we will continue to use for the remainder of this episode. You should know by now that I'm a big proponent of the two-tiered system for describing healthy habits, with tier 1 being the foundation, diet, exercise, sleep, meditation, and having a primary doctor. These are the non-negotiables that one must put in place prior to doing the fancy stuff like saunas, spas, weighted vests, and the list goes on. For the rest of this episode, we will cover 3 categories: cardio, strength, and everyday athlete habits. We'll apply a tier 1 and 2 lens to this so you can understand what you need to have as a foundation and then how you can build on it if you already have tier 1 in place or if you want to take it to another level. Again, let's not bury the lead. Here is how you should look at exercise before we dive into the research, so you understand the why. Here are the foundations for exercise, or the non-negotiables. Move your body on all, if not most days of the week. Strength train twice a week. Focus on the major muscle groups. We'll talk about this a little more later. Break up sitting and build your daily steps, including something called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or otherwise NEAT. This is essentially the physical activity from non-exercise activities like chores or just fidgeting around. Work on some mobility basics. Flexibility and balance work are good examples of this. Ensure you prioritize sleep and consume enough protein to support recovery. More on this in future episodes. When you have this in place, you can optimize with performance upgrades. You can incorporate VO₂max focused intervals. Your training can be periodized with progression and planning so you hit new goals and hit personal records. You can utilize power and specific balance training, especially if you're over 50 years or older. You can get into wearables and you can use heart rate zones or rated perceived exertion to calibrate your intensity and manage your training load. You can make your exercise, sport, or activity specific, so you can work on running economy, speed and agility, or skill development. Just remember, you don't have to be an athlete to make meaningful changes to the way you move your body and still get amazing benefits. Okay, so you probably already know that I'm an Aussie American. I like to compare and contrast the US with Australia and the recommendations from public health perspectives. I did it during my TEDx talk in Boston, where I discussed healthcare systems And we also covered it in the last episode when we reviewed the dietary guidelines. I like this because when I moved from Australia to America to practice medicine, human physiology didn't change, and the way that patients responded to the medicine that I was giving them wasn't any different. In my opinion, it's really an interesting way to hold public health recommendations accountable. So the recommendations are actually quite similar. Let's break it up into different groups so that we can be just a little bit more granular about that. Let's talk about the US guidelines first. So the US guidelines recommend that preschool-aged children 3 to 5 years should be physically active throughout the day to enhance growth and development. Children and adolescents aged 6 to 17 years old should do 60 minutes or more of moderate to vigorous physical activity daily. Adults should do at least 150 to 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity or 75 to 150 minutes a week of vigorous intensity aerobic physical activity. They should also do muscle strengthening activities on 2 or more days a week. Older adults should do multi-component physical activity that includes balance training as well as aerobic and muscle strengthening activities. Pregnant and postpartum women should do at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity a week. Adults with chronic conditions or disabilities who are able should follow the key guidelines for adults and do both aerobic and muscle strengthening activities. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends that adults engage in moderate intensity cardiorespiratory exercise for 30 minutes per day on 5 days a week for a total of 150 minutes per week. Vigorous intensity cardiorespiratory exercise training for 20 minutes a day on 3 days per week. On 2 to 3 days per week, adults should also perform resistance training involving 2 major muscle groups and do exercises involving balance, agility, and coordination. It's also crucial to maintain joint range of motion, completing a series of flexibility exercises for each of the major muscle tendon groups. A total of 60 seconds per exercise on 2 days per week is recommended. The American Heart Association also recommends very similar volumes and types of training to optimize heart health. Now let's head on down to the Aussie guidelines. Doing any physical activity is better than doing none. If you currently do no physical activity, start by doing some and gradually build up on the recommended amount. Be active on most, preferably all days of every week. Accumulate 150 to 300 minutes of moderate physical activity or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity physical activity, or an equivalent combination of both moderate and physical activities each week. Do muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days a week. The Aussie guidelines also make an emphasis on limiting sedentary behaviour. Minimize the amount of time spent in prolonged sitting and break up long periods of sitting as often as possible. So really, in reality, there are no real significant differences between the two countries and the different organisations that provide the recommendations for physical activity. Although the Aussies do lean pretty heavily on making sure that you break up sedentary activity throughout the day. Sadly, around 3/4 of Aussies and Americans don't meet physical activity guideline recommendations. Even fewer people aged 65 and older meet those recommendations. So, like diet, why would we blame the guidelines when few actually meet them? Let's recap and blend the two country recommendations into some actionable targets. So, adults 18 to 64. Aerobic activity, they should target 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate or 75 to 150 minutes per week of vigorous activity. Strength, 2 days per week of all major muscle groups. If you're sedentary, sit less, break up prolonged sitting. The translation here is that 30 minutes on most days of the week plus 2 strength days. Older adults for 65 years and older, they should hit the same aerobic and strength targets where able. They should have multi-component training, balance exercises, strength training, and functional movement. Think of strength and balance training as fall insurance. So kids and teens, they should aim for about 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous activity. They should include bone and muscle strengthening activities, about 3 days a week. Yes, kids can lift weights. I'll say that again, kids can lift weights. In fact, I argue that if you have your kids lifting weights at an early age, it improves their movement capabilities such that they find it easier as an adult to keep the habit up. So yes, play does count, but we should leverage a time in their life where they're already relatively free to instill a love of physical activity. Pregnancy and postpartum should focus on safety, symptom-guided intensity, and maintaining activity where possible. Pregnancy is probably not the best time to start your road to becoming a CrossFit world champion, but it's certainly okay and encouraged to keep moving, keep lifting, and when you welcome your new bundle into the world, build back gradually. If you have a chronic condition or disability, I would emphasize that something is better than nothing. I often tell my patients in this category that even getting up and walking to the letterbox and back once or twice a day is enough to get started, and it's moving in the right direction. You should really start where you are. Just progress it slowly. Consistency beats hero workouts. So epidemiological studies have shown an inverse relationship between cardiorespiratory fitness and cardiovascular disease and overall mortality. Simply put, the fitter you are, the less likely you are to have heart disease, that's strokes, heart attacks, or to die prematurely. We should take a moment to better understand some terminology here, as research in this area does use some standardized language that's used to understand a person's maximum aerobic capacity. First, METs, which stands for metabolic equivalence. 1 MET equals the energy or oxygen used while sitting quietly, approximately 3.5 mils of oxygen per kilo per minute. For reference, if you're taking a slow walk or cooking dinner, you're asking your cardiorespiratory system to work at under 3 METs. You're revving the engine, but very lightly. But if you're frantically shoveling the driveway of snow before your partner gets home from work, you're revving that engine really hard and likely operating at higher METs of around 6 or 7. You can also describe maximum aerobic capacity as VO₂max. There's a very popular term on social media, and many of the current wearables will give you an estimate of your VO₂max after you've lived with it for a while. VO₂max is expressed as an amount of oxygen in mils per kilo per minute. So the amount of oxygen that you use per kilogram of weight per minute. There are many factors that determine this number, including genetics, metabolic machinery like the enzymes that process chemicals like glucose and lactate, lung capacity, and the quality of your lungs for gas exchange. The max part of this term describes the maximum amount of oxygen that you can use while exercising vigorously. When we're discussing these studies, they'll describe participants' maximum aerobic capacity as maximum METs or VO₂max. You can get to this number in various ways. The gold standard is measuring VO₂max directly by having the participant wear a mask during a gradually increasing intensity exercise test. For example, asking them to run on a treadmill that slowly increases speed and incline for about 8 to 12 minutes until you literally can't run anymore. The mask collects the gas entering and leaving your body and directly measures your oxygen consumption and therefore your maximum aerobic capacity. And this is usually expressed as METs or VO₂max. You can then estimate this using surrogate tests like a beat test. Here you'll do shuttle runs up and back on a court or field with increasing speed per level until you can't run anymore. Depending on what level you get to, your score correlates to a score for VO₂max.
The multi-stage fitness test will start in 5 seconds. Ready.
Start level 1, 1. Start level 17, 1. Level 17, 2. Level 17, 3. Level 17, 4.
All right, that was a lot. And that audio gave me some nightmarish flashbacks. Are you still with me? Now, we've got to understand what these numbers mean and how they affect your health and longevity. A large meta-analysis from 2009 assessed 33 studies that looked at the relationship between max aerobic capacity, expressed as cardiorespiratory fitness, using METs and all-cause mortality. They had over 100,000 participants with 7,000 cases of death. And for cardiovascular disease, they had 84,000 participants with around 4,500 cases of cardiovascular disease. They split participants into low, intermediate, and high cardiorespiratory fitness levels and found that compared with the intermediate group, those with low fitness had 40% increased relative risk of mortality and 47% increased relative risk of cardiovascular disease. The intermediate group had a max aerobic capacity of around 7.9 METs, which equals about a VO₂max of 22. So not a whole lot. When you compared the highest cardiorespiratory fitness to the lowest, the effect was even more dramatic, with the lowest group 200% more likely to experience mortality or cardiovascular disease. The highest MET group was 10.9, so a VO2 max of around 33. For those people in their 40s, this should be achievable. Of note, you will lose naturally around 1 MET or 3.5 mils per kilo per minute of VO2 max every decade. So storing and maintaining cardiorespiratory fitness early in life is a good idea. This study found that at age 50, a MET score of 8 for men or 6 for women, so around 28 or 21 on VO2 max, was associated with substantial risk reduction for both all-cause mortality and cardiovascular disease. In addition, a 1 MET increase in aerobic capacity was associated with a 15% risk reduction. So here, the higher, the better. For every small notch your VO2 max goes up, your risk of dying in the next decade drops, with similar effect sizes as going from high to low LDL cholesterol. Okay, so now that we have the background to understand why having a higher aerobic capacity is important, how on earth do you actually improve it? Now, to be clear, the guidelines say 30 to 60 minutes per day of moderate physical activity. This is the type of exercise that we're talking about. I always like to talk about what's popular on social media, or more accurately, the broadcast universe. Some things that I see: zone 2 workouts, rucking, fasted cardio. The reality is that most are not meeting the guidelines, so just getting started will be fantastic. When I was coaching back in Australia, professional A-League soccer team Gold Coast United, Aussie rules football team Southport Sharks, I had the same formula that improved VO2 max and aerobic capacity of the athletes. What I've learned as I've gotten older and hopefully wiser is that there are many ways to brew the stew when it comes to exercise, notwithstanding cardiorespiratory fitness. So should we all be doing low intensity exercise for 1-2 hours? Or should we be doing high intensity intervals? If you listen to too many podcasts, you might be led to think that the answer is zone 2 cardio and rucking. But is that accurate? So let's start with zone 2, which is defined as low intensity exercise below the lactate threshold. Many have described it as the optimal intensity for improving mitochondrial function and fatty acid oxidative capacity. Simply, you get better at using oxygen to burn fat for energy. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. They have all the enzymes and the machinery to turn fat and glucose into ATP, which is the energy unit that our body uses. When you train, you upregulate these enzymes, so you get better at utilizing both fat and glucose. Therefore, you reduce your risk of insulin resistance and other chronic diseases. Many popular influencers will say that zone 2 training is superior to high intensity training for mitochondrial function, often citing the correlation between these elite level endurance athletes and the amount of low intensity training that they end up doing. I would question how translatable this is for the general public though, who are really only aiming for 150 minutes of exercise per week, not 20 hours like these elite athletes. Either way, doing zone 2 training, basically where you can hold a conversation while running, walking, hiking, biking, will improve your mitochondrial function. Also, it can be a little more palatable for many to do regularly. Let's contrast this with high intensity intervals. Here you would find out what your maximum heart rate is. Typically, the best way to estimate this is taking your age away from 220 beats per minute. So if you're 20 years old, then your max heart rate is around 200. There's so many protocols, and the one that I like and use regularly with my athletes was 3 to 5 sets of 2 to 6 minutes of high intensity exercise at about 90 to 95% of heart rate max, with 2 to 4 minutes rest. A systematic review looking at different intensities of training showed that training intensity didn't really make a difference in mitochondrial density, as measured by something called electron microscopy, or as activity measured by citrate synthase activity. They reviewed a number of articles that showed a twofold improvement in mitochondrial function and therefore cardiorespiratory fitness with low and high intensity training. Most encouragingly, another paper found that in sedentary people, mitochondrial function can actually improve up to 6 times. What's consistent is that training volume, so how many times you exercise, is the most important thing you can do for your cardiorespiratory fitness. Let's wrap this up in a bow. It doesn't need to be zone 2 or high intensity intervals. You also don't need to go rucking around your neighborhood every day. You simply need to be doing something on as many days of the week as you can. The foundation for the cardio template includes 2 to 4 easy or moderate sessions per week, zone 2 intensity for brisk walking or jogging or biking or swimming. 1 optional, longer, easy session on the weekends or when time allows. Try to increase your daily steps at baseline. Aim for over 10,000 and take sedentary breaks. Get up and walk around regularly when you're at work. Now, if you want a performance upgrade, add on at least 1 to 2 interval sessions per week. For example, 4 sets of 4 minutes of hard running with 2 minutes rest for recovery. Do an occasional hill or flat sprint session. You can do 10 to 14 reps of 100 meters with 1 minute rest. It's very time efficient. Then you can periodize your training. So you can build your load and intensity over a 3 to 4 week block and then deload for 1 week to recover and avoid plateauing. This is really where you might want to talk to an exercise physiologist or a trainer for more personalized advice. Back when I was a strength and conditioning coach, I lectured to exercise science students. I loved it, but what I was teaching them was wrong. Well, not all of it, of course, but there was this outdated view that in order to get strong, you had to lift 2 to 6 reps of heavy weight, and to get bigger or gain hypertrophy, you had to lift higher reps, 8 to 12 reps with a moderate weight. And then, if you want to train endurance, you do light weights with more repetitions, upwards of 20. The reality and prevailing science is that it doesn't really matter. When you lift, you get stronger and build muscle. One of my favorite studies, which modified my thinking on this, is from one of the giants in the field, Brad Schoenfeld. His group conducted a meta-analysis of studies looking at repetition duration and hypertrophy, or muscle growth. They found that muscle growth occurs at a wide range of durations from 0.5 seconds to 8 seconds. So the answer is, do what you like. You might be asking, well, why is building muscle important? It's not my phrase, but I really like it. We should talk about the context before content. The context is that every human on Earth should have the goal of resistance training to maintain and optimize muscle mass. What does that mean, I hear you say? As we age, there is a condition called sarcopenia. If you've heard that term, if you don't use it, you lose it, this applies here. As you age, you lose muscle and you have risk of increased fat deposition in the muscle. So you really need to train the muscle that you have so that you don't lose them. Now that you've got those muscles, you want them to be functional so you can make them strong so that you can do things that you love, like pick up your grandchildren or just to crush them in a 40-yard dash. Now that I've owned up to what I got wrong, let me tell you about what I got right. My company was called Acceleration Gold Coast. It was a franchise of a company started by my good friend and mentor, Stuart Briggs. Our motto was to help athletes run faster, get stronger, and jump higher. I remember Stewie drilling into my brain that it's all about the movement. We need to train people on how to move better. Now, of course, we were training athletes to move for sport. Soccer, figure skating, Aussie rules, swimming, cycling, and basketball. Our company was focused on training athletes, and I'll admit there was a healthy dose of bravado in wanting to work exclusively with athletes. At the time, I remember actively resisting the idea of training so-called non-athletes. But in hindsight, it was a missed opportunity. Everyone should be training like they are an athlete, even if it's like an athlete on their very first day of picking up a sport for the first time. So having said all that, let's go talk about what it looks like to put together a strength program that works and one that you can stick with. Let's reframe. Strength isn't just about aesthetics. It's about function and independence. Independence to lift your grandkids up off the ground when they fall. It's about being able to get up out of your chair when you're 75 years old, and my personal ambition to be able to surf cloud break in Fiji and to beat my kids in a running race when I'm in my 60s. I recommend you find out your why. We already talked about cardiorespiratory fitness and how that can improve cardiovascular disease risk and mortality. But how does resistance training or muscle strengthening activities affect those same outcomes? A large meta-analysis from 2022, published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, showed that muscle strengthening activities reduced mortality and cardiovascular disease risk by 10 to 17%. Now, to be fair, these two outcomes are not the only ones that strength training can benefit us as we get older. We should also include bone health, strength to reduce the risk of falls, injury prevention and recovery, reduction in diabetes risk, and even cancer. But we can talk about more of those specifically in future episodes. Now that you're appropriately gobsmacked at how beneficial strength training is, the next question you likely have on your mind is, what do I actually need to do to get these benefits? This meta-analysis did a great job because they performed a dose-response assessment, and they found a J-shaped curve, which means that for every 10-minute increase in strength training done per week, the relative risk reduction continues to increase. The peak for all-cause mortality was around 40 minutes per week, and around 60 minutes per week for cardiovascular disease. Even more wild is that when you look at combining cardio and strength training, the relative risk reduction is around 40%. That's crazy. I can just hear you through the camera. Dr. Cois, just tell me how we do this. All right, let's look at this screen capture of what a strength training program can look like. In the meantime, go ahead and visit my website and click on the free resources pop-up so that you can register for free online training programs just like this. If you click on the Performance MD website, you click on the clipboard after you've logged in, you can select your training program, and then you can scroll down, making sure you've chosen the correct date that you're doing your workout on. When you see all of the exercises there, you can see the number of sets and reps that you're going to do. If you don't know how to do one of the exercises, you just click on the name of the exercise and it'll bring up these instructions, which include videos, which you can see here. In addition to that, if you're not sure what you should be working on, you can click on any of the exercises and then scroll down to the bottom and you can see the coaching cues here, which will tell you what things you need to work on and what muscles you'll be working while you're doing the exercise. Make sure that when you finish your workout, you scroll down all the way to the end, choose when you're going to do your next workout, and click I am finished, and it will automatically put in your weights for the next week based on what you choose. Sometimes people say, I want to increase by 5%. All right, now that we've gotten through another mountain of information, let's hit the highlights. Strength work is associated with lower mortality and better metabolic health, independent of cardio, but additive when you combine them. Strength work and balance training reduces falls risk. This matters as we age, and getting strength in the bank early is important. It's never too early to start or never too late to start. Everyone can do strength training. Why should I, an emergency physician, care about any of this? Well, unfortunately, I see all of the downstream effects of neglecting strength training in the emergency department. I see the hip fractures, the frailty, the loss of independence. This is what's driving me to make this content for you. Here is the foundational strength template. In other words, the minimum effective dose. 2 days per week, full body. You should aim for about 4 basic movement patterns: a triple extension exercise, a push, a pull, and some sort of single leg exercise. 2 to 4 sets each of 6 to 20 reps, making sure that you stop 1 to 3 reps before failure. This should progress week after week. Again, check out my website, drcois.com, for free resources to help guide you through this process. How can you upgrade this to improve your performance? You can increase to 3 to 4 days per week. It can be a split or a full body program depending on your goals and time restraints. You can add power work. You can do jumps, medicine ball throws, Olympic lifts, or kettlebell exercises. You can add unilateral work and other exercises that help to challenge your balance. This will ideally be done with a structured progression and periodization across training blocks. This would be a really good time for you to engage with a professional who can help you further. All right, team, now that we've covered the 2 big rocks, cardio and strength, we're going to talk about the thing that quietly determines whether those 2 big rocks actually work in real life. Because here's the truth. You can do 2 great workouts per week and still spend the rest of your week training for the Olympics of sitting. This segment is about becoming an everyday athlete, not an Instagram athlete, not a new shoes, new identity, new supplements athlete, an everyday athlete. Someone who moves like movement is normal, because it is. Let's start with a phrase you've heard me say already, NEAT. It's the silent multiplier. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Basically, all the little movements that aren't formal workouts. Walking to the mailbox, carrying groceries, doing yard work, taking the stairs, fidgeting. chasing your kids around the house like you're in the final of the World Cup. And NEAT matters because it's part of your day that happens more often than your workouts. Now, when people ask, Dr. Cois, how many steps should I aim for? This is where I try to deprogram the internet. 10,000 steps isn't magic. It's not a sacred number handed down from Mount Fitbit. But, and this is the important part, more steps generally tracks with better health outcomes, especially when you're moving from not much to some. The biggest gains often happen early, and then you get diminishing results as you climb. So the way I like to frame it is, if you're currently doing 2,000 to 4,000 steps a day, don't aim for 10,000 next week. Aim for just 1,000 more per day. If you're already doing 6,000, aim for 7,000 or 8,000 on most days. If you love 10,000, keep it. It's a great stretch goal. It's just not the entry fee for good health. And if you want a simple line to remember, don't worship the number, build the habit. Now, steps are one thing, but the other villain in this story is what I call the long sit. Prolonged sitting, hours at a desk, hours in the car, hours on the couch. Even if you exercise, the long sit can still be a problem. So here's the simplest anecdote I've found. Movement snacks. A movement snack is a tiny dose of movement sprinkled in throughout the day. You don't need a gym, you don't need Lycra, you don't need a training montage. You need 1 to 2 minutes. Here are a few movement snacks you can literally do between emails. You can do 10 bodyweight squats. You can do 10 counter push-ups. You can do 20 to 30 seconds of a brisk walk around the room. You can do 1 flight of stairs. You could do 10 lunges, a 30-second wall sit, a set of calf raises while you brush your teeth. And I'm going to say something slightly provocative. If your life is chaos, kids, shift work, meetings, movement snacks might be the most reliable exercise you'll ever do because they don't require motivation, they require availability. Now let's turn this into habit snacks because if you leave it to, I'll just remember, you won't. Here are my favorite habit stacks. Habit stack 1, the post-meal walk. After 1 meal a day, pick dinner if you want, take a 10-minute walk. That's it. 10 minutes. It's not a workout, it's a life habit. It helps your steps, helps your mood, and is a nice way to transition out of the meal instead of sinking into the couch like a satisfied python. Habit stack number 2, the phone call walk. Any call that doesn't require a screen becomes a walk. If you have work calls, family calls, catching up with a friend, put your shoes on and pace, or just go outside. Habit stack number 3, the commute upgrade. Park your car further away. Get off 1 stop early. Take the stairs. If you can walk 5 minutes more per day without finding time, you've just won. Habit stack number 4, the sit break rule. Every 30 to 60 minutes, stand up. Walk for 60 seconds. That's not a wellness gimmick, it's anti-stagnation. It's telling your body, hey, we're alive, we move. And here's the key mindset shift. Everyday athlete habits are not optional extras. They are tier 1. Because if cardio and strength are the workouts, NEAT and sit breaks are the environment those workouts live in. So to wrap this segment up, I want you to choose just one of these to start this week. A 10-minute post-meal walk, 2 movement snacks per day, the 30 to 60 minute sit break rule, or a daily step baseline that's realistic. Not perfect, just repeatable. And if you do that, you've just made the exercise pill stronger without adding a single extra workout. All right, team, now we're going to take everything you've heard so far and turn it into something you can actually put in your calendar. Because the internet loves giving you the perfect plan. But you know what? You don't really need the perfect plan. You need a repeatable plan. So this is the 80-20 approach, the smaller set of actions that gets you the most benefit and doesn't collapse the first time your kids get sick, your shift runs late, or your motivation evaporates. Tier 1, busy human week, the foundation. Here's a template that covers the guidelines, builds strength, and keeps cardio simple. Monday, strength, full body, 30 to 45 minutes. This is your anchor workout. This is non-negotiable if you can swing it. You're building muscles, joints, and confidence. Tuesday, Moderate cardio, 25 to 40 minutes. Take a brisk walk, jog, bike, or swim. Whatever you repeat. Remember, moderate means you can talk in sentences. Wednesday, focus on steps and NEAT. Do some mobility, up to 10 minutes. This is your keep the chain alive day. Take some movement snacks, walk, do some mobility, just do something. Thursday, strength, full body, 30 to 45 minutes. Second ankle workout. If you do nothing else, do these 2 strength days. Friday, moderate cardio, 25 to 40 minutes. Same deal, build the base. Saturday, optional longer easy session or a fun activity. This is where you go for a hike, play a sport, do a longer walk, ride your bike with the kids, whatever makes you feel like a human again. On Sunday, rest. You could also just take an easy walk and plan for next week. Rest is training and planning is a performance enhancer. Now, you might be thinking, Dr. Cois, I'm an ED nurse, a resident, a parent, a human disaster. I can't do that. Totally fair. So here's the adaptation rule. If a day collapses, replace it with the minimum viable workout. Minimum viable workouts are things like 10 minutes of brisk walking, 2 rounds of squats and push-ups and rows using a band or a backpack, a short bike ride, a quick hill walk. The goal is not to win the day. The goal is to keep the identity, which is I'm someone who trains regularly. Tier 2, optimization of your week. This is the performance upgrade. Tier 2 is where you layer in performance, but only when Tier 1 is steady. Tier 2 might look like 2 to 3 strength sessions, plus 1 power athletic session, jumps, medicine ball throws, kettlebell swings, or fast reps if you're older and don't want jarring on your joints. Zone 2 sessions, plus 1 interval session. Daily steps baseline, plus planned sit breaks. 1 recovery day that's still movement, walking, mobility, cold plunges. And if you're thinking that this sounds like athlete stuff, yes, it is. But it's how you train for longevity. You build capacity, you protect your joints, and you keep your body doing human things. The 3-step implementation. Now, I want you to remember the theme from the nutrition episode. We made it practical, we reduced friction, and we set the default path to the healthy one. Same here, 3 steps. Step 1, pick your anchor workouts. 2 strength days. Put them on your calendar, protect them like an appointment. If you only have to do one thing from this entire episode, do that. Step 2, add 1 cardio habit you'll repeat. Same day, same time, same place if possible. Routine beats motivation. Step 3, build a friction plan. What stops you? Is it time? Is it gear? Is it confidence? Is it weather? Put your shoes by the door. Pre-pack your gym bag. Have a home option for bad weather. Start embarrassingly small if you need to. A lap around your block. Then for week 2, make it double. Go around the block twice. If you shift work, attach your workouts to the edges of your shift blocks. For example, a short strength session on your first day off and a walk after your last shift before you crash. You don't need willpower, you need systems. And if you do that, you'll get the benefits we've been talking about. Better cardio fitness, better strength, better resilience, and yes, less bad days and more good decades. All right, lightning round. This is where we're going to de-weaponize the internet. First question, do I need to run? No, you need to move. Running's a tool. It's a good tool, but it's not mandatory. If you hate running, you'll quit. If you quit, the plan fails. And the best exercise plan is the one you keep doing when life gets messy. Walk briskly, bike, swim, row, hike, dance, use an elliptical, play a sport. Pick something you can repeat without negotiating with yourself every single time. Question 2, is Zone 2 overrated? Zone 2 is useful, it's sustainable, it builds a base, and it doesn't fry you. But the hype sometimes make it sound like Zone 2 is the only way to train, and that's just not true. For most people, the real magic isn't Zone 2, it's just getting volume and consistency. And if you're time poor, a bit of higher intensity work can be very efficient Tier 2 upgrade. So the answer is Zone 2 is great, but it's not a religion. It's one tool in the box. Question 3, does cardio kill gains? Not if you're sensible. If you're doing a reasonable amount of cardio and you're still strength training, eating enough protein and sleeping, your gains will be totally fine. The reality is that most people don't have an interference problem. They have a not training enough to create any problem. So yes, both can coexist, and for health, they should. Question 4, what if I'm starting from 0? Perfect. 0 is a great starting point. because the early gains are huge. The rule is start small enough that success is guaranteed. Start with a 10-minute walk, add one strength day with simple movements. Build in tiny increments. If you start too hard, you'll hate it and you'll get really, really sore. You'll miss a week and then your brain will label you as, I'm just not an exercise person. You are an exercise person. We just need the plan to match your current reality. Question 5, what's the best exercise? Oh man, the answer to this question is simple. It's the one that you'll do and the one that addresses your biggest gap. If you've never strength trained, strength is probably your gap. If you can't walk upstairs without getting winded, cardio is probably your gap. If you exercise but sit all day, NEAT is your gap. The best plan is the plan that fills your gap. Do I need a wearable? No, wearables can help, but they're not required. You can use the talk test and effort scale and be perfectly fine. Should I do rucking? If you like it, great. If you hate it, don't. Walking plus strength training covers most of what people are chasing with rucking anyway. How sore should I be? Soreness is not proof of effectiveness. It's proof that something changed. The goal is progress, not punishment. When you start out, you will be sore. Manage this with gentle mobility exercises, foam rolling, making sure that you're getting enough protein and you're getting the rest that you need. Okay, let's land this episode. Today we kept the theme going. Tier 1 foundations first, then Tier 2 performance upgrades. Tier 1 is your non-negotiables. You've got to move most days, strength train once or twice a week, hit a realistic amount of cardio, break up your sitting, build everyday movement, steps, NEAT, habit stacks. Tier 2 is the fun stuff, the performance upgrades. You can start using intervals to push VO₂max, you should periodize and progress your training, you can incorporate power and balance work, especially as we age. You can use wearables and you can get data, which can be helpful if you want, but it's not mandatory. You can do sport-specific training if you've got performance goals. And if you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Pick 2 strength days per week. Choose one repeatable cardio habit. Pick one everyday athlete habit, like post-meal walk or movement snacks. That's it. That's the recipe for becoming the best version of you, who gets less bad days and more good decades. If you found this episode helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a simple plan, not more internet noise. In the next episode, we're going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart as a sleep-deprived emergency physician: sleep. All right, team, see you next time. Don't forget to visit my website, drcois.com, to get some of those free resources.